When most people picture a hacker, they imagine a faceless figure in a hoodie. But in reality, cyber criminals are real people running real businesses, often chasing profits and modding video games. From playing Capture the Flag to finding Roblox cheat codes, from jailbreaking IA models for fun to leaking 6.5 million co op customers' stolen data, the evidence shows that the next generation of hackers aren't getting their training in IT positions. They're learning in their teenage bedrooms, hacking for fun. They have the skills. The question is who they'll choose to use them for. Will they decide to break the law or build better, smarter systems? Nick, we've seen this trend in recent arrests related to UK retail hacks with the suspected Scatter Spider affiliates aging from 17 to 20 years of age. I'm sure a lot of people are shocked by this, but is this uncommon?
No, it's not uncommon at all. And I think, the recent arrests and shockingly young picture of the individual that caused disruption to a lot of people in the UK is shocking, but it's actually not a shocking statistic. A lot of young individuals are leaning towards different opportunities that exist, whether they're in the good space or in the bad space. And I think it's, up to us and some of our listeners to encourage young people to use their skills for good and make it exciting to do so. In fact, when you look at Europol's study, they do some studies and found that 69% of children have committed a cyber misdemeanor, which I think that is a shocking statistic, right? The average age of cybercrime conviction for them is 19. So I think we have to really pay attention to our youth and help them to understand the opportunities that exist for using their skills for good versus bad.
69%, that's crazy. So if you have three kids, two of them statistically have committed some sort of cyber misdemeanor. That's wild. But we're very lucky today because we have an expert who is incredibly passionate about addressing this particular problem at its root cause. We're joined today by Fergus Hay. He is the founder and CEO of The Hacking Games. Fergus, welcome to the podcast. Can you give us a quick overview about what you do?
Well, guys, first of all, thank you so much for the invite. I think when you're referring to those kids, I think like they're in my house, actually. they're my kids at the moment. So we created the Hacking Games a couple of years ago. The vision is to create a generation of ethical hackers to make the world safer. But in its most simplistic fashion, we're trying to direct kids from committing cybercrime and redirect them into a career in cybersecurity and make society and governments and private enterprise a safer place to be. So if you are a company or a government who is looking for the next wave of unconventional Gen Z hacking talent, reach out, join our design partner program. We'll get involved with our model as we calibrate it to suit your needs, and you can get the first wave of talent. You can join some amazing companies that are already on board. If you are a security company and you want to showcase your security credentials to your customers and your investors and your market, get in touch. We're doing amazing brand partnerships with the likes of the Co-op and a whole host of other companies that you'll be announced soon. So we've got a great media platform. We're making amazing content. We need your partnership and support to do it, to inspire the next gen. And then if you want to learn more about how this generation can help you, get in touch. We've got a wealth of insight and knowledge and research. We want to share it. We want to get the message out. You'll see us at every single conference at the moment. We seem to be invited, so that's great. And our job is to create a generation of ethical hackers to make the world safer. So we can't do it on our own. It takes a village, super big cliche, but we will be the point of the spear, but we need companies and government support to do so.
So tell us a little bit about your journey to cybersecurity. How did you get into it? Is it traditional?
Well, a bit like a kind of blind, drunk toddler, basically. I mean, I have zero credibility to be in this world. I'm not a hacker. I'm not from cybersecurity. I'm not technical. But I am a kind of parent, kind of driven by increasing paranoia. And it really started about 2 years ago. My now co-founder, my then friend, Dan Deer, he's still a friend, by the way, who's a cybersecurity entrepreneur, 25 years in the industry, set up and sold a bunch of companies. He said, hey, look, I want you to come and meet some hackers. And at the time, I was, associated with a bunch of venture capitalist funds and looking for interesting things to invest in. So I turned up to a windowless meeting room in Amsterdam. And I walked in, and there were 3 hackers in the room and 3 hackers on the phone. And I walked out about 3 hours later, just totally aghast, completely shocked. And I got on a plane that afternoon, and I flew from Amsterdam to Zurich, which is one of the most beautiful flights you can take. You fly over the steepest part of the Alps. Everyone has their noses to the window, and it's like, oh, Toblerone, but in 5D. And there was just like one unbelievably anxious person on the other side of the plane hammering away at my laptop. And I wrote this kind of pretty incoherent, incomprehensible 2-page panic mission statement. Basically, to quote your stats earlier, Nick, about the kind of shocking youth profile of cyber criminals, basically saying, we've got to do something about this. Why is the world not talking about this? I was shocked to hear the stats, and I got them verified by our partners in law enforcement. And it just amazed me that, the average kid, it's not niche. It's like the average kid is hacking, and they're not committing crimes from like the streets at midnight on a Saturday night. They're doing it from their bedrooms in predominantly suburban houses. And that just shocked me. So it was a life mission. I landed, I remember, in Zurich, and I called Don and I said, we got to do this. I don't know what it is we're going to do, but we're going to do this. And then fast forward 2 years, and we are where we are today.
I have a feeling after this podcast, I'm going to be restricting even more my child's access to Roblox and Minecraft.
Straitjacket is absolutely fine, by the way. It may breach some sort of human rights convention, but it does keep them off the hacking sites.
Fergus, what attracts people, young people into cybercrime? What is it that's doing it?
Well, look, I mean, it's the base of human curiosity and creativity. I think the myth is that like hackers are these kind of got hoodies up, no face, matrix in the background, hammering away at a keyboard. I think that's a really, really like sexy media proposition for cyber criminals, and it is true of a certain type. But actually hacking, really hacking, is a mindset. It's problem solving. It's the baselines of human curiosity. There's a great guy called Jeff Mann, who is the founder of the NSA's Red Team. And he's a bit of a guru, and I had a delight to spend a bunch of time with him. And I said, well, Jeff, you must be super technical. And he said, I'm not technical at all. He said, I'm a puzzle solver. And when he grew up, he played with wooden cubes and metal puzzles. And that's what he did with his dad. And he said, hacking is problem solving and puzzle solving. And when you really look at it, you go, well, okay, take an entity, take a thing, break it down into its component parts, understand what's vulnerable and what's not, reconstitute them for an alternative use, build them into something better. That is the basis of human creativity. Without that hacking mindset, we would be riding horses to work. We'd be reading by candlelight or heating ourselves by coal. So I think that's the base pursuit is curiosity, problem solving, boundary testing. That's what has always got humans at a very young age interested in stuff.
Can you give me a couple of like examples of, real cases just to sort of knock it home for the listener? Like what sort of things, cross your desk in this world?
Yeah, well, look, we'll start with the lightly digestible. There's a kid we're going to call B. When he was 12 years old, he hacked Roblox, found an exploit, and he got a hold of, a bunch of tokens. Now, Roblox, you'll be familiar with, 79.5 million kids a day play Roblox. Just to put that into perspective, the most watched piece of TV in the world is the Super Bowl. Happens once a year, 6 hours of painstaking patience, and 120 million people watch it. So a day and a half of Roblox, just to put it into perspective. So B was playing Roblox. He found an exploit. He hacked it, and he got a whole load of tokens that hadn't been released. High perceived value. And he sold them on the secondary market. And in one day, aged 12 years old, he made $35,000. And then he took that money and he put it into Bitcoin. And 18 months later, it was in a wallet worth about $400,000. And his parents only found out because he came up to them and said, at what point should I start paying tax?
Maybe he could do something with the economy. That'd be great.
Well, that'd be awesome. A good contributor. By the way, the answer for anyone listening who's now freaking out about what little John or Jane is doing upstairs is $6,000 in the US for a minor. That's the tax threshold. So Benjamin is, works for us now. He just did an internship. He's 15, amazingly talented, brilliant kid, unconventional mind, and is going down the right path. We've got another kid called Dylan. This is in the public domain. When he was 12, it was during COVID, and his high school wouldn't let him use Teams. So none of his classmates could use Teams. So they were going stir crazy at home, driving everyone mad. I personally still have PTSD from that period. And so he thought, well, the only way to solve that is to hack Microsoft. So Dylan hacked Microsoft, opened up Teams for 2.5 weeks, so all of his friends and actually a wider community could use it. He got hooked by the FBI. And they referred the case to Microsoft and said, what do you want to do? Do you want to prosecute him? And to Microsoft's great credit, they didn't prosecute him. They gave him a job. And last year at Black Hat Vegas, he won Bug Bounty of the Year at Microsoft. And you can imagine, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but it's a very significant amount of income he would have made at the age of 15 legitimately. And he's a great example of, again, a kid gone good. But then there's the other side. There's the less celebrated stories where the great talent has gone down the wrong side. So you'll be familiar with Gary McKinnon. Gary was a gamer, British teen gamer, neurodivergent. 12 years old, he's playing games, hacking games, breaking stuff. He gets lured in or fell into the wrong communities online in the hacking communities. And by the age of 16, he committed the largest military hack in CIA history. So he's now in an extradition battle between the UK and the US, and it's probably not going to end up well for him. I think even more sinister is obviously the big story is about Julius, the Finnish hacker who hacked the mental health platform and leaked records of hundreds of thousands of patients with their most intimate secrets and that caused suicides and deaths, etc. But I think where it gets really, really sinister is the story of Junaid Hussain. Junaid, again, was a British teenager from the Midlands, also neurodivergent, autistic, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. At 11 years old, he was already hacking and breaking games and creating his own mods. By about 12, he had been kind of identified online by the cyber gangs. By 13, he was being put to use to create lots of value for the cyber criminals. By 14, he had been identified by ISIS. By 15, he was radicalized. By 16, he had moved to Syria and was their head of misinformation and disinformation online. And at the age of 19, he was killed by a US drone strike targeted just for him. Now, the really sad story about Junaid, and we have community members who knew him really well and also who know Julius, what they would say is Julius was a psychopath. We knew Julius was a psychopath. We knew online the way he behaved that he was psychotic. Junaid was an unbelievably sweet, vulnerable kid who was autistic, the kind of kid who you could say, put your hand on the fire and see if it's hot or not. And he was manipulated and groomed to the most appalling levels. The reason why that's a really important story is that the convergence of neurodivergent minds and hacking is really tight. Winston Churchill and created the corkscrew mind strategy and got Alan Turing and a bunch of brilliant autistic mathematicians and physicians to put into Bletchley Park to solve the Enigma code. There is a really amazing correlation between puzzle-solving neurodivergent minds and hacking. But there's also vulnerability there. And unfortunately, these kids are finding their pathways in gaming online. That's actually good. That's developing skills, but it means they're highly exposed to manipulation. And Junaid and Gary, both examples of victims of that.
Crazy stories. I didn't know half of those stories. That's wild. Thanks very much for sharing that. And yeah, a real shame that someone died. And that's just one. I'm sure there's many more. I mean, what makes cybercrime, a lot more accessible to young people these days? Is it, TikTok, YouTube? What's how does that work?
Well, I think it is a couple of different answers to that. It used to be really hard, didn't it? When you were hacking, it was hard. You had to be really bright. You probably had to build a computer. You had to source parts. I mean, Chris Weissapal, Wellpond, who's the, founder of Loft and the founder of Veracode, he's on our board. He regales me with delight of stories of them doing, bin diving, trash diving, where you go to the dustbins and find old bits of thrown away computers in order to build your own supercomputer set. So it was really hard. And you had to be brilliant and challenging and persistent. But now it's really easy, right? Google will give you the tools. YouTube will teach you. TikTok will inspire you to live a life beyond your wildest dreams. And the Discord will find you your community. So the barrier to entry for kids is really zero. On top of that, gaming is a live laboratory. that people are practicing as kids. And if you look at the numbers, there are 3.2 billion gamers in the world. There are 3.5 billion soccer or football fans, just to put that in perspective. 93% of Gen Z game. They spend on average 30 minutes a day on Instagram, 80 minutes a day on TikTok, 114 minutes a day on gaming. In fact, the Times published data yesterday to say that British male teenagers are spending more time gaming than they are doing homework. So what you've got is like a live laboratory of testing, experimenting, hacking, modding, breaking games, breaking each other, doxing each other, creating aimbots. And that is like fueling this ability. And it's rewarded all the time with XP points and promotions and competitions. So you're kind of engendering this behavior and legitimizing it. I think in a way it's brilliant because they're developing great skills. But where it becomes really difficult is that the crime of cyber, as Nick knows better than anyone, is very dislocated. If I'm going to walk down the street and try to mug Nick, first of all, I think he's built like an athlete, so I'm unlikely to do it. But secondarily, like for me to like get out a knife and put it in his ribs to take his wallet, it takes an awful lot. That's a major barrier. But on cybercrime, you don't see the victim. You don't feel the pain. And so it's much easier to persuade yourself that it's just an extension of your gaming behavior. I mean, Nick, what do you think? I mean, you've lived that in that world.
Yeah, I think that individuals can cross the chasm of what is good and what is bad very, very easily. And I think the line between, like you said, modding and hacking is very minuscule, right? So I think it happens at a young age, step by step, stage by stage, and eventually, you're moving from leveling up in different games, maybe finding additional ways to speed your progress along, to thinking about whether you could access a different bank account or look for a vulnerability in a website. And, if the repercussions of those actions aren't tangible for the individual, it becomes almost like the victimless crime. And I think a lot of young individuals who are incredibly talented on the computer and with different services that exist for crime as a service, it becomes very easy for these individuals to test the boundaries. And if there aren't those repercussions or visible punishment, if I do so, I may venture across if I don't know what they are, right? So,
but I still have faith in the human code. It's so interesting. So what the data shows from law enforcement, and Nick, you'll know this, but is that like the vast majority of kid hackers are not criminally minded. And in fact, if you look at the repeat offender rate in jail for serious crime, it's 75%. Right? And that's US data. So 75% of incarcerated people will end up back in there for serious crime. The repeat offender rate for cybercrime is 20%. That's really interesting, isn't it? What does that show you? That it takes a lot to be a serious criminal. It doesn't take a lot to be a cyber criminal. And ergo, there's lots of people who fall into it who are not naturally criminally minded. So I have faith in the base human code. And the example story of that I'll give you is Marcus Hutchins. So you'll be familiar with Marcus. Wired magazine called him the hacker who saved the internet. And Marcus is part of the hacking games. He's on our advisory board and amazing guy. And if you don't know his story, it's relatively apocryphal. There was the WannaCry virus that hit the world. It was the first global computer virus. It was seeded by the North Koreans, and it took down the hospital systems in 25 different countries. And it started in the UK, actually. Like, we went down hard and, people couldn't get processed, you couldn't get operations, you couldn't get meds, people, couldn't get looked after in A&E or ER. And so it was a really big deal. Probably the first people attributed to death from a cyber attack. And it was solved by Marcus. Marcus, who was kicked out of school at 14, who's a kind of neurodivergent mixed race kid living in the West Country in the UK, which is kind of the outback, basically. And he's a surfer, but he found the kill switch. And the interesting thing about Marcus is, and his story is a story well told, so I'm not giving you anything original here, but he became the hacker who saved the internet. Front cover of Wired magazine, all the media all over the world not letting him go, profiled as a hero. Great. He was flown to DEF CON and Black Hat to give speeches, and he got hooked by the FBI. And it was like, oh, you want me to tell you how clever I am? And they were like,
That was wild.
no, Marcus. When you were 13 years old, you wrote some malware that's been used for serious financial crime, and you are going down. And he got a 10-year jail sentence that was commuted down to time served, because the judge said, look, you're an inspiration and an example of how you can be a bad kid and then go to be a good kid. Now, Marcus will tell you that his Lazarus moment, his moment where the ethical fork in the road, he knew he was writing malware that was being used for malpractice. He knew that it was hurting people, but he didn't see it. But it was when he was asked to QA some of his code, and the guys who were using him said, Marcus, your code isn't working, or someone's struggling to use it. Can you just go onto the system and interrogate it? And he went on and he saw the live case, and the live case was that his software was being used to steal a pensioner in Florida's life savings.
Yeah.
And that was his moment.
Real.
That was his moment. And that's when he stopped.
That's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, such a polarizing story, Marcus's story, especially with, solving the biggest cyber attack on earth basically at that point in time, to then, being arrested. I remember all that happening. And I've read the Wired article, fantastic piece on him. You talked about, the gaming side of things and like Roblox and that. What does that journey look like for a person? My kids, they'll probably play Roblox or Minecraft or something at some stage. Talk me through that journey from signing up to ending up being a cyber criminal.
Yeah, I mean, they should, by the way, not be a cyber criminal, but they should play the game. That's not the purpose of this podcast, right? No, so I think you got to start with understanding why gaming, right? So the overlap between gaming and hacking is 100%. Every hacker is a gamer. Not every gamer makes it as a hacker, but every hacker is a gamer. And that's because it's problem solving at rapid scale, incredibly dynamic, super competitive, and super accessible. So the message is celebrate gaming. If your kid is in their bedroom playing Fortnite, don't pull your hair out because the feckless kid is not doing his homework and is only playing Fortnite. Actually realize that he's developing incredible skills in that gaming environment. And there's some research published by our Chief Product Officer, John Madeline, alongside 2 different universities, that has done an analysis of the core competence skills that, first of all, a performative gamer makes across 100 different games, including League of Legends, World of Warcraft, Sims, Grow Garden, the whole gamut of what skills they're developing as a player and how they correlate to a cybersecurity career. But then most interestingly, what are the modifications they're creating for the games and how that correlates to cybersecurity skills. For example, if you're creating an aimbot on a Call of Duty or Fortnite, that is a precursor to memory injection and MITIPs. If you are doxing each other online to get a competitive advantage, that's the precursor for DDoSing. Big analysis, you're welcome to come and contact us and we can share it with you. So gaming is a lead-in. Now, the guys who worked that out, by the way, are the cyber criminal gangs. They're the guys who, as the head of the dark web at Europol showed us, they're the ones who are cruising the gaming platforms, identifying kids who are modding games and hacking games and then grooming them as operatives. So that's the breeding ground. But so the journey is actually, this is a bit of thinking produced by the Prevent guys. So Prevent is a collection of law enforcement agencies around the world who have come together to prevent kids from falling into cybercrime. So it's organized by Interpol and Europol and 200 law agencies around the world working together. And what it shows you is a journey. And the journey is that, sadly, hardware adoption is now starting at 4 years old. So you only need to walk into your local Italian restaurant on a Sunday lunchtime and you'll see families there and the kids have just got, face planted into, it used to be face planted into a bowl of spaghetti, but now it's just face planted into an iPad. So hardware adoption starts early and of course everyone's playing solo games. The journey then is into playing online games with others. Then the journey is into looking for cheat codes in order to get upgrades in the game because mum and dad won't give me the money that I want. That's not illegal. And then it's looking for modifications. And the journey is normally, I've been taken out of a game by a competitor. How's he done that? Oh, I'm going to work it out. Oh, I found out there's this modification world. Oh, I can pay for mods. And then actually I can create mods myself and then make money out of mods. So now you're in nefarious space. And by doing that, you're already falling into Discord communities that are talking about modifications, and it is a very easy leap to go from like hacking each other's gaming accounts to hacking each other's crypto accounts, and that's the journey. And then you're falling into lots of different directions, into lots of different types of cybercrime, from enterprise crime to crypto heist to individual social engineering pieces. And you're basically, the minute you're in modification world and you're on mod forums, you are on the radar of the cyber gangs. So that's the journey.
So Fergus, I know it's really interesting, and thank you for kind of going through the synopsis of how an individual ends up from being a typical gamer to a modder to crossing that chasm of becoming a cyber criminal. I think it's really interesting when they slip into that area of cybercrime, whether it be a Discord group or Reddit channel. All of these skills of that individual become readily available to a cyber criminal. If you look at where someone can go after, a gaming site, etc., it could be the dark web, it could be Telegram, for all of these crime as a service tools that exist for someone who, may not be able to build a computer themselves, but have an inept ability to solve a puzzle. Then they've really slipped down that path to committing these crimes, but most importantly, becoming visible to these cyber criminal groups. Once they're able to set up a phishing site, collect credentials, be successful at taking over an account, it doesn't become a far stretch for them to see a advertisement for ransomware as a service group and become affiliate, and then maybe taking down the next Metro or Costco or something like that. So there's no food on the table for individuals. So yeah, it's super interesting, and thanks for sharing that.
But Nick, I think what's amazing for me as a layperson was like how sophisticated the recruitment processes of these cyber gangs. I mean, they have HR departments.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's incredible. So what have you seen in that space? I mean, like, how organized is it?
Oh, it's super organized, excuse me. I think when you comment about, how they can go into Discord groups about modding games and things like this, this is where the cyber criminals are going to have that early on talent. And, we as defenders hacking games are targeting these individuals at the early stages. Cyber criminals, they are operating as a business, right? They're only going to do what is most profitable and the highest return on their investment. So they need to scale their operations, have the best talent, just like the good guys do. And to do that, they're going to the source, where people are looking for different tools, like how do I develop phishing websites? And that may not be on, the deepest dark web forum that's super hard to reach. It may be, advertised on Instagram about look at my lifestyle and how great I am. And you could be like that too and join our group here, right? So, these cyber criminals are highly organized like a business, and they're scaling their HR practices, quite frankly, a lot better than the good guys at this stage.
I mean, that's exactly what we've come across. And, I'm not going to share it because people shouldn't see it, but there's a TikTok channel that is creating grime videos. So like American rap, but our equivalent in the UK is grime, and celebrating how to hack ATMs, how to social engineer people's bank accounts. Like, they are doing the oldest trick in the book, which is to use popular culture and cool content to sell a product and a service and a lifestyle, and it's and they're really good at it. Compare that to the government's anti-cybercrime initiatives. I mean, I think the last thing I saw was like an animated cartoon at the Super Bowl. I'm just like, I don't think that is dad on the dance floor right there. So yeah, I mean, they're super organized. And
yeah, anecdotally, I was doing some research about different fraud cases that were existing not too long ago, connected to like fake receipt generation. And I was doing some research on that, searching fake receipt generation, etc. Later on that evening, lo and behold, on my stories is someone going into a Best Buy with a Lego and a receipt, getting money. As he comes back out to his car on the story, it starts to tell you like, knockoff product, fake receipt generated. Now I'm $80 in profit from, $10 spent on this fake Legos, right?
unbelievable.
So it's organized, it's advertised.
Yeah,
Also
right.
me searching that, right? And
well, luckily the social media platforms are really responsible and highly incentivized to stop bad stuff flying around their platforms.
yeah, right.
Those are the good guys, right?
Put it into perspective for us. How big an issue is it if, 69% of kids are out there doing cybercrime?
Yeah, well, let's look at the numbers from the top down. So data this year shows that the global cost of cybercrime is $10.5 trillion. That's the global cost of COVID, according to the IMF. Last year it was 8 trillion. It's forecasted in 2 years' time to be 23.8 trillion. I don't know if that number is accurate or not. Who knows? It's a forecast. If it is accurate, that is the GDP of the United States. If it was a country, it would be the third largest country in the world.
That's not a wake-up call. I don't know what is.
Right. I mean, it's unbelievable. So, talk about compound annual growth rate. I mean, it's absolutely shocking. And then you look at the numbers, and Nick had them at the beginning. The Europol data research paper was by Julia Davidson from the University of East London. 14,000 teenagers interviewed across Europe and the UK, and 69% had committed a cybercrime or a gross cyber misdemeanor. Now, the threshold of that in the Europe is pretty low because of our regulations, but it just gives you an idea of the volumes of it. So, I think to your point, Nick, it's like if you've got 3 kids, 2 of them are hackers. Well, 2 of them are committing cybercrimes. Of course, they're not all going all the way, but the volumes are unreal. And probably the best way to describe it is that the 4 perpetrators who were arrested for the hack of Co-op, which supposedly Scattered Spider. Co-op is a huge retailer in the UK. It's like the largest retailer in the UK. So they hacked Harrods, Co-op, and Marks and Spencers, and they reportedly have hacked Jaguar Land Rover, but that's unverified. And the 4 people who were arrested for the first ever hacks were aged 17, 19, 20, and 20. So I think you can connote that the volume is enormous of kids doing the hacking. We know that, for example, we're rolling out a program in the UK with the Co-op to 20,000 school kids. And when we spoke to the head of computer science for this network of schools, he assured me that every single one of his kids are hacking. Every single one of them. The first question they ask when they walk in is, what am I hacking today, sir? And they're engaged, really into it. Guess that's a good thing. So I think it's undoubtable the scale of the problem, but it's also an amazing opportunity. And I think that's our motivator. If you take the fact that they're not naturally criminally minded, you've got a generation of talent here, guys, that is unbelievable. They hack differently, they're built differently, they learn differently. They're developing their skills in the live laboratory of gaming every single day, in a way that, your generation, my generation, you had to work pretty hard to develop these skills. Now it's really happening fast. And if we can identify them, and if we can provide a legitimate pathway to see their skills, make them from invisible to visible, show them that there's a career path for them, show them they can fight bad guys, they can get paid well, they can have careers they could never imagine, then I think you've got an entire untapped generational talent that can make the world safer. And I think, we can talk about the problem. I think it's really cool to talk about the solution, because there is a solution here.
I mean, Group IB hires people all the time. Our Slack channel is very much alive, and you get to see the picture of the new person that's joined that day. And there's a lot of people joining every week for sure. But, these people you're talking about here, they're kids, right? So they're not going to be on LinkedIn with their little resume. So, I mean, where do we find them? Do I get like Nick and me to go and join a Roblox server and go, hey guys, want to work with us?
I might get you in trouble.
Exactly.
So let's frame the profile. We say kids, but they're 12 to 27-year-olds. We're talking about 16-year-old plus, basically. But also, most importantly, they're unconventional minds. The age thing it's the way the world segments demographics. But I think more interestingly is how people think, the unconventional minds. And there is a correlation between the more unconventional mind and the less mainstream you are. So the less visible you are. So I think the industry has got a labor deficit problem. It's published at 4.8 million unfilled jobs. Not sure if that's true, but it's certainly a lot. There's certainly a skills deficit problem. But what we hear from CISOs, from the tech companies, from the defense industry, from the governments, is that they're under attack every day by hostile, creative, antagonistic enemies, criminals. And the talent that they've got, predominantly really talented, but can be quite conventional, often gone to university, have done government compliance certificates, have got, years experience as a SOC analyst, really, really capable, but not really equipped to think like the bad guys, and certainly not the Gen Z hackers who are 19 years old, who are trained, learned, built, hack differently. And so it's been described to me as an asymmetric war. It's an unfair balance. So what we're being asked to do is find unconventional talent. But as you rightly said, where you're not going to find them is on LinkedIn. And they're not going to write you a resume. And if they have written a resume, it's going to be written by ChatGPT and it'll probably be read by ChatGPT. So it's just like two ghosts talking to each other. And they're not going to probably be at university, to be honest. They're more likely to be dropping out of school at 16 or finding quite manual jobs because they don't fit corporate culture. So I think you've got to change how you evaluate people. And we have this conversation a lot with the recruitment divisions because they're spotting the wrong things. So what I'm looking at is not whether they've done compliance certificates. I'm looking at what their performance is on Call of Duty. I'm looking at how progressed are they in the Stanley Parable. Like, how good are they at chess? Then we're looking at their modification software they've created for those games to get an idea of their real world experience. How many times have you heard that entry-level people can't get a job because they haven't got real-world experience, right? What is more real-world? Studying computer science for 3 years in a lecture theater, or spending 6-7 years hacking games, developing modifications yourself, finding penetrations? The reality is these guys have got way more real-world experience than the people who are interviewing them, but we're not evaluating it. So that's what our approach is. We build a tech platform called Hapti, the Hacking Aptitude AI platform, that builds a full aptitude profile of this generation by looking at their performance across 100 different games, looking at their modifications of those games, looking at their vulnerability disclosures, their performance on bug bounties and CTFs. And then we have a psychometric model that we've developed with Mark Loftus, who's a MPhil from Oxford University, who has developed a psychometric model to look at the levels of neurodivergence in this talent. So we can build a whole profile of their aptitude as a hacker based on their unconventional data inputs. And we think that will give you the best picture of the talent.
Super excited to see what this looks like. I think it's going to be absolutely incredible database of the best upcoming minds in the future.
Nick, can we profile you?
You haven't sent me my test account.
Okay, we're going to do that. I'm going to both of you guys.
I'm going to need one.
Proficient at Call of Duty, but not anymore.
Well, hey, once a gamer, always a gamer. And so, no, we're putting you both. Can you publish it? Actually, we're going to do your Hapti profile, and then you guys can publish it to see how do you match against each other. And more importantly, how do you compare to Marco Liberale, our 13-year-old savant ethical hacker?
He's going to be safely the savant afterwards, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
And how does Group IB find this amazing talent?
So we do a lot of work with local universities. So in every place that we have one of these digital crime resistance centers, we're often, I don't know if I should say donating, but supplying our technology to different universities. So deploying our network security solutions so that the students at these schools can use them to say, okay, we have malware that entered our mail system. It infected this endpoint. What do we do now? And we also have an education and training division. So we devote our curriculum to a lot of the professors there. So, they really learn real hands-on experiences of, what do we do when something infects a computer? How do we better protect our network? So we find a lot of talent that way. We also have a good stream of internship programs at Group IB. So a lot of people start as interns.
We need more Group IBs in the world, and you haven't paid me to say that, by the way. I mean, that is actually true, because I'll give you a counter argument to that. There's an amazing lady in our team. I'm going to name her Lorne Rowlandson. Remember the name. She's just insanely talented. I mean, just like generationally talented. And she was picked up by the UK Cyber First program when she was 14. Right. So they run these national programs. They do outreach to communities and schools to try to inspire young people to consider cybersecurity, government funded program. So she gets picked up by that. And then she gets picked for a bursary. And what that means is they fund her to go through university. and she got to Oxford and she studied computer science and philosophy. What an amazing mix of a degree. She is unconventional minded, incredibly talented, but she could not get a job. She could not get a job. Oxford, top degree, computer science, government picked, paid by the Cyber First program. You know, you couldn't think of a more like, who's going to get the job out of this group? It's obviously going to be her. And in the end, it was because the processing of jobs was not suited to her. You know, she's not someone who can sell herself on a resume. She couldn't think of anything worse than to try to do that. She's, you know, she's not someone who's going to enjoy doing a Teams interview, you know, or now even doing an interview with like an AI avatar. Like that is the only way she got a job is I sat next to her partner at a dinner, and he is tenacious to say the least. And he would not leave me alone until I met Lorne for a coffee. And I basically did it just for like peace of mind. Yeah, it's just like, God, oh my God, leave me alone. And I met her, and he was there as well. Like he just pop a dog with a bone. Anton, by the way, great guy. And she was incredible. And now she's, you know, an amazing talent. So the challenge in all of that is that how can we replicate what IB is doing, Group IB is doing for the industry to identify this brilliant talent?
Seems like we might have found a way.
Well, I hope so.
So, Gary, I know my journey into cybersecurity was untraditional, but I know yours was as well. So put yourself out there too and tell us how you got into cybersecurity.
Well, it wasn't for love, but I guess I watched the movie Hackers when I was a kid, the Angelina Jolie and Johnny Lee Miller movie, and it was really cool. I really liked the music and the sort of the vibe of, you know, that world. Even though the hacking that was on the screen was like ridiculous, it looked like some sort of Windows screensaver from, you know, the early 2000s. And then I kind of, you know, forgot about it back then. You know, I was only 10 years old or whatever. So, you know, phones didn't exist in the way they do today. The internet didn't exist in the way it did today. We didn't have YouTube or anything. So, you know, I would never have thought, let's get down the library and get some books on C++ and then be so good at it that you actually break it and learn to hack. You know, that never would have crossed my mind. But nonetheless, then when I was a kid, like when I was 4, I did martial arts. When I was 13, I joined the Army Cadets. I did my A levels, which is like your sort of 17, 18 years of age exams that you do in the UK that sort of set you up for uni. But I did terribly. I got like 2 Ds and an E. I got an E in computers, right?
Clearly not very bright.
Yeah, I got an E in computers, and now I can hack computers, and I use computers every day to do pretty cool things. So, like, what does that tell you?
Take that standardized test, huh?
Yeah. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I'm Northern Irish as well. So, like, you know, I wasn't going to go to Oxford or Cambridge or any of these, you know, fancy, interesting places. And it was just different whenever I was growing up compared to what uni is now. You know, when I was going to go to uni, it was only from other people you heard about like what uni was like. As we're nowadays, you're on TikTok and you get to see kids going to uni and it's really sold to you. So I just wasn't sold on the whole thing. To be honest, I'm still really not sold on it, unless it's for a very good reason. But I ended up joining the military. So I did 4 years with the Royal Navy doing communications work, with lots of computers, with my nice E in A levels at computers. And then after a few years there, I went over to Army Intelligence, did Afghanistan, all that sort of stuff. And it was at the end of my sort of career in the military, I heard about these guys that were doing some hacking stuff. And I asked, you know, could I do that? Because I was the geeky one, right? I was the one that sort of ran our local network and managed all of our data and things like that in the place that I was within military intelligence. So I was a sort of resident computer whiz kid. But I wasn't eligible to go and do that sort of hacky stuff because it was just sort of older, more senior people testing, playing with things. So I kind of forgot about it, to be honest. Fast forward a few years, I was in Nationwide, where I worked as a risk analyst. Nationwide is like a big UK-wide financial institution. And someone mentioned this, we were talking about TV shows. Someone mentioned this TV show, Mr. Robot. I went and watched it. I was like, I love movies and TV shows, right? And Mr. Robot has an amazing soundtrack, unbelievable acting, beautifully shot. So I was sort of hooked. I was like, this is really a really cool show, because it doesn't show what you saw in Hackers, the sort of screensavery stuff. It actually shows real hacking. But this time, YouTube exists. So my curiosity was back. And bear in mind, I thought about this stuff when I was in the military. So yeah, I started going on YouTube, ended up finding Hack the Box, downloaded Kali Linux, eventually got a job doing cyber threat intelligence, because I was in military intelligence. There was a natural, I can very easily communicate the threat to senior management about cyber threats without saying and ah and too many times. Yeah. Plus, I'm actually hands-on keyboard technical enough to do some level of hacking. I'm not a 13-year-old savant, right? That can just do it. I have to be taught. And I'm not a gifted programmer at all. Eventually, I did my OSCP, which is a pretty challenging 2-day long exam. Yeah, so that was kind of my journey into this. I ended up running CTI teams for some of the big banks in Singapore, and then back here in the UK remotely.
Here is, at the time, a kid who's clearly super bright, super talented. Clearly, mainstream education is not working for you, right? Clearly, like, assessments like A-levels are not assessing you. They're actually reducing you, not even assessing. And you had to find your pathway out of the kind of conventional academic system, and you found it through the Navy and which is amazing apprenticeship, isn't it?
Yeah,
going into the armed forces, and then you, through your own curiosity, you had your peaks and troughs. But what I heard is two things there. I heard that there was moments of like cut through popular culture that let you dream, right, and grabbed your attention and showed you role models. If I'm a hacker, do I get to hang out with Angelina Jolie? I mean, that's what I heard.
Back in the box.
Yeah. That must be the answer. But it shows you the power of media, and Nick, you're so right, because in the end, society is punctuated by cut-through storytelling that creates aspiration. And of course, like, let's go back to Top Gun, right? What happened when the original Top Gun came out? You got a 500% increase in applications to the US Navy, by a bunch of lunatics by all accounts, but you got a big increase. Look at The Queen's Gambit, the Netflix show about chess. It drove like 500% increase in purchase of chess books. It was like, drove loads of women into playing chess. Chess.com crashed because of the overload. Look at, in the UK, it's a UK reference, but Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. This is an amazing story where, postmasters in the UK were being prosecuted for fraud by the UK government, basically by the post office. But it was all down to a faulty accounting system. So they were innocent. 500 of them went to jail. 5 people committed suicide. And the country knew about it for 25 years, but it was all stuck in the bureaucracy and nothing was happening until they made a 4-part TV show called Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, which is incredible, by the way. You don't need to be British or into post, and you can still like it. And that caused legal change within 6 months, a relief fund of £150 million, 500 people released from jail. My point here is that popular culture and media and entertainment can drive aspiration. It can cut through people's thinking. It can inspire people to want to do something. And at the moment, the cybersecurity industry has done, frankly, an unbelievably bad job of communicating. It is like one of the worst I've ever seen. The barriers to entry of cybersecurity from like accessibility is so high. The way it presents itself, the language it uses, it's been hiding in the shadows. And because of that, Gen Z don't care. They don't care about the industry. And, we've got Bea Skylab, who set up the Girls Who Hack platform when she was 11. She's now 18. It's a safe space for female hackers. She's the chair of DEF CON Next Gen, and she's the founder of our youth community. Bea and I were sitting in a room last year in America with a bunch of very senior executives, all of whom were of a certain type, as you'd expect from a, US, you can imagine, but there wasn't a lot of hair on the top of the head going on, and there was a lot of gilets. But they were very brilliant people. And she said to them, look, guys, you are irrelevant to me. She looked them in the eyes. You are irrelevant to me because you don't speak my language. You haven't made cybersecurity aspirational. You haven't done what investment banking did in the 70s, or what tech did in the 2000s, or what AI is doing now, which is make this the coolest thing I could even dream of deploying my skills in. And we've got to change that. And you've just referenced two moments that affected you with the hackers and Mr. Robot.
Mr. Robot.
Yeah. And so we've got to drive popular cultural cut through to this young generation. And that's a lot of the stuff that we're doing at the hacking games as well.
Yes, that's a bold move from such a young kid to be able to have the confidence and the sort of wherewithal to stand up and say, you are irrelevant to me. You know, like that's bold. I like it.
And she is a sparrow of a person, right? I mean, she's slender, and she absolutely bossed it. And they did not like it, by the way. I mean, it was an uncomfortable moment, but it was a truthful moment.
Thought, too bad.
Yeah, she didn't seem to care. I was stressing next to her. Yeah, they've flown us out here. But it is important. So just to put some context on that. So a cool part of what we do, obviously we have our tech platform that evaluates the talent and we're going to see your guys' outputs. But you've got to get the talent interested. So you can't speak to them like parents or teachers or schools or governments or even companies, really. You've got to speak to them in popular culture. So we have 4 levels of that. The base level, we've got community engagement through B-Sides and DEF CON. The next tier up is we have Gen Z content creators from ethical hacking and gaming, creating TikTok, Snapchats, Instas. I don't touch it. I don't review it. I don't look at it. My OCD lets it go, which is a minor miracle, but my therapist says it's a good exercise. And we let the guys do it. And it's Gen Z creating content for Gen Z saying cyber's cool. And look, I checked the TikTok on Friday, had like 750,000 views with no media behind it. Like, so the kids, they know what they're doing. And then on the third tier, we have, when I was growing up, we used to gather as teenagers around music festivals, right? That's how we kind of came together. This generation are doing it around esports, 550 million esports viewers globally. So we're doing the first ever ethical hacking esports tournament. We're doing that in partnership with the Ministry of Defense in the UK and some other defense from other countries. That'll be next year. And we actually hired the former CEO of David Beckham's esports team to run that for us, Jasmine Ski. She's amazing. So we're doing esports, and we'll hopefully roll that out to the Saudi World Cup, which is where all the esports is happening. And then at the top tier, I've got 13 TV shows, documentaries, short form, long form, scripted, unscripted, going across streaming platforms, broadcasters. You're going to start to see that all coming out to ultimately do what Adolescence did. Adolescence, you'll be familiar. 120 million people viewed it within 7 days. The most watched thing in the history of Netflix, apparently. And you saw they won a Grammy 2 days ago. And what Adolescence did is it got the topic of boys being weaponized in their bedrooms by the manosphere on the family dinner table. And Stephen Graham, who won the Grammy, and he wrote it and he acted in it, amazing performance. What he said is, the thing he hears most is people say, thank you for getting us talking. And that's what we've got to do here. We've got to get Gen Z excited about being an ethical hacker, understanding that they can be superheroes. They can be the, savers of society. They can use their skills. They can be recognized in the way that you weren't when you were younger, right? And then they can have careers, and they can be the heroes walking into the room, not invisibles shuffling in from the side.
And from like the hacking games perspective, what can people expect if they participate in that? What does it look like for them?
As in the experience?
Yeah.
So it's annoying. I can't disclose too much about the esports formats, but what we're not doing is CTFs. It would be the world's worst piece of entertainment. Would be to go on Netflix and watch people play a CTF.
I don't know. I've seen that Microsoft Excel Warrior Championship thing, and they're all in like a massive esports stadium. That's pretty good stuff. Like,
but what were they doing in there? Were they doing a CTF?
Yeah, basically it's whoever completes the challenge first to like rearrange the spreadsheet, put all the colors into.
Oh yeah.
That's
but that's a creative interpretation, right? That's the guy, the British guy is just going to Tokyo or something for the final of that or something. Yeah. But you've done CTFs. They're like hours and hours of people bashing away at a computer. It's not a spectator sport.
No.
So what we're going to do is take games that people play, like Call of Duty and Fortnite, and we're going to have professional. I'm wondering if I'm about to get myself in trouble here. Sorry, legal team.
We can cut this if we need to.
Oh, don't publish it. It'd be funny. So we're basically gonna have professional gamers competing in tournaments that you all know, with titles you all know, so you can imagine what kind of titles, but the top 5 gaming titles, and they're going to have an extra team member.
Oh, that's cool. Like oh yeah, I know what you're going to say. Okay, amazing. Can I join?
Well, why not? We'll make you a star. You're already an esports star. So. Yeah. So the idea is like, a bit like Mission Impossible, right? There's Ving Rhames in the truck or whoever the Sean Pegg in the truck. But now you would have like a hacker in your team who's defending and attacking the other guys. And I don't know if you saw, but like Apex League of Legends, the final got cancelled halfway through it. And there was a $4 million prize fund, and it got cancelled halfway through it because it was clear that the teams were hacking. So it's like this is a live thing.
They're invited.
This kind of reminds me of like the Olympics. I've always said, we should just have an Olympics that's doping, so you can have the doping in Olympics, and we can like try and work on the science of it, like figure out the chemicals that you need, because the use cases for those could be.
But that's happening, right?
Yeah, it is happening.
The enhanced games,
yeah. So this is like the sort of the hacking games kind of part of it, right? So that's very cool.
In the name,
it's a good name, that. What's the sort of like long-term vision here?
Yeah, I think the long-term vision is that we've changed culture. The long-term vision is that a 15-year-old kid doesn't think about not going to university isn't the only thing, and that identifying skill sets of what they're doing on gaming platforms, which is only going to get more, right, is celebrated. And so we're working with governments of 3 different countries to run national programs where we will split it into 3 pillars. We will inspire kids with hackers that they can look up to. So Marcus Hutchins is going to come into a bunch of schools, and he's going to be, they can relate to him in a way that me or the gentlemen who are in that conference who got told they're irrelevant can't, right? So we'll do inspire with in school and content. Then we will evaluate them with our platform, and then we will enable them with training programs with our partners, Immersive, and fingers crossed, the biggest game in the world, and I can't say who it is, but you can imagine, who are going to hopefully build some cyber development training programs in the games. And it goes into the curriculum. So it's not just for the early adopters, it's not just for the special ones, it's for every kid. And, and that's happening in the UK. Keir Starmer, who's our current Prime Minister, he launched a program called Tech First. It's brilliant. £185 million to educate 1 million kids over 4 years in AI and quantum. Cyber, AI, and quantum, and that's going to be executed on British teenagers. So it's happening. We're working with those guys to indoctrinate it. But success is that all kids wake up in the morning, and when they list top 3 careers and what they want to be, one of them is protect our country, protect our society, create civic resilience, and fight the bad guys. Be more Nick, basically.
Be more Nick. Nick, you've been here long enough. What does Group IB do in this space? Like, investing in education and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mentioned a few things before that we do to, look for up and coming talent. I think we're going to have to check out Hapta and some of the streams that they have coming into their platform. But, the one that stuck out to me that we do here at Group IB is Inspire, right? When you walk into one of our digital crime resistance centers, you'll see on the wall, fight against cybercrime. And, this isn't some kind of like corporate motto BS that, may exist in a lot of companies, but it's about being a superhero. And really, a lot of people at Group IB are infected by this message. To be able to research the bad guys who are conducting advanced attacks against financial institutions, e-commerce companies, profiting the size of the U.S. government, as Fergus well positioned it for different crime. This is really infected by a lot of people at Group IB. So, inspiring the people is one thing. Those that are inspired stay with us a long time, and I think that aspirational goal to be a cybercrime fighter is really important pillar, as Fergus mentioned, right? So, next is enabling them, right? Putting them in situations that may be above where they could be today in a normal corporate ladder. I mean, like, when I was handed a laptop and a phone and I led Group IB sales team, I was young guy with no experience, right? And I had no business running a sales team in a normal, CrowdStrike or large organization and cybersecurity company, but I did it, right? Because we enable our people that have good talent and skills to get out there and do what it is they're capable of doing. So, I think it's inspiring and enabling are some of the things that we do. And yeah, I hope we infect more people with that mission.
Hopefully that's the only thing we infect people with.
Good caveat.
What's the impact here if we don't invest in young talent?
Yeah, I think, when you have an incredible amount of knowledge and skill, maybe not in the traditional sense like your E or D that you got on your A studies, but you have two choices. If you're growing up in Nigeria and you have an incredible amount of technical capability to hack through, Call of Duty or what have you, but you have to feed your family at the same time. You apply for jobs, there aren't any jobs. What are you going to do? You're going to turn to whatever it is that you have to do to, put food on the table, right? And that may be along the lines of phishing or account takeover, whatever it might be, right? So I think not investing in this future talent, in the capabilities of individuals to fight against cybercrime, will inevitably lead those people to choose a path that contributes to that overall financial burden that is in the global community at the moment.
We've got some research that we're doing with Professor Jonathan Lusthaus from Oxford University. He wrote the Human Impact of Cybercrime as a book. He's a sociologist, and it's called the Vulnerability Index. And we are evaluating how vulnerable are kids in every country in the world to falling into cybercrime, and what are the socio-demographic factors that lead them there, such as divorce rates, the gap between tertiary education and job opportunity, internet penetration, poverty, cost of living, to try to build an environmental picture of why there are some centers that are more aggressive than others. You can look to South Asia and India, for example, and you can understand it. You've got a super digitally literate nation and not so easy to find the paid work that they need. And it doesn't take a leap of imagination to persuade yourself that it's okay to, hack a US business in order to pay for your family to eat. No, why was that okay for Robin Hood? Right? So you can understand that. But why in the UK? Why has the UK got such an incredibly high density of teen cyber criminals? It's incredibly high, right? I don't know if you saw literally just 10 minutes ago, the BBC News announced that the two teenagers have been arrested for the hack on TfL, Transport for London, literally just 10 minutes ago. So, but why is it in the UK? We have a higher level of neurodivergence in the UK than many other countries. It's also interesting. We have a deep history of cryptography coming out of Bletchley Park, also interesting. We are by nature a very creative culture, very, very creative culture. But why one country more than the other? What are the factors? And if we can understand the factors, then we can understand what knobs to twiddle, right? And that is a government policy question. That's not the three of us solving it. That's like, look, guys, let's get the insight into why, and then we can work out what we can do about it, because the end goal has to be civic resilience.
You just mentioned government and policies there. What's the one thing that you would ask businesses and governments, to take from this crisis?
Yeah, well, opportunity. First of all, let's look at it as an opportunity. I think what I want companies to do is follow Shireen El-Khoury, the CEO of the Co-op's example. She was hacked, or her company, the Co-op was hacked, largest retailer. The four perps were teenagers who had been arrested and not convicted. She went from being the victim she took the company from being the victim to deciding to solve the problem. And that's why we have a 5-year partnership with them to inspire, educate, enable young teenagers. Follow her example, right? Be part of the solution, not just the victim. There's so many companies being hacked every day right now. And what everyone is doing is putting a elastoplast over the issue and then making some banal statement about, shareholder security, whereas actually we need to solve the problem. So what I would ask of the companies is change your hiring policies, release the shackles, identify the unconventional talent, bring in apprenticeships, change how you think about what good looks like, because you're losing. If you want to win, change and go and find the unconventional talent. To the governments, actually, they're pretty all over it. I've got to say, I'm really impressed by the armed forces in particular. They've all, they're at war, so they're on a war footing. But they understand the issue because they see it through law enforcement. They're moving to policy changes. Was really excited about the Tech First policy launched by Keir Starmer. Honestly, that's great. And in a world where there's not amazingly great policy news in many countries right now, that was an amazing one. I'm hearing the same in the US. I'm hearing lots of things in the US, but I'm hearing the same in the US. So I think the governments are there. The UAE, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, they're really aggressive on it because they've got a really young population of gamers, and they understand that they need to mobilize them as talent. So I think governments are great. Private sector needs to step up, is what I would say. What do you guys think?
I mean, you know more about this than I do. I have a very sort of point in time take on my interactions with government. I do think that whenever I was in the military, it was a great environment that if I know I didn't get the chance to go and do the cyber stuff, but it wouldn't have been out of the question eventually. And like if anybody's joining the military today, they can probably join the cyber unit. But even if you were in another unit, the military is kind of a cool place because you just get to like play around a little bit. Like it's quite flexible. You can go hang out with the snipers for a day if your buddy's in the snipe, and fire a weapon or whatever. It's very flexible like that. But I guess it's only like that once you're in. And companies are a little bit like that. Like a lot of the companies I've worked for, even the big ones, they're pretty flexible. If you come in as a CTI specialist and you want to go and work 2 days a week with the incident team, that's a thing that can happen, but it's only once you're in. So I think you're right. Like we need to approach it different when we actually hire people from the outside. We need to totally change our approach. And human resources and legal departments, I think, are going to struggle the most with that because
management, because if you really want the unconventional corkscrew minds, you have to manage them differently.
Yeah, you can't just do like weekly one-to-one check-ins and, smart goals and all that sort of stuff. It won't work.
I mean, I had a call this morning with two people who are trying to make a big difference in inclusion, and they were fairly and rightly voicing their frustration and anger about the treatment of them as women by men in the industry. Absolutely fair. But their image was that the person who was treating them poorly was doing it vindictively. But then I said, but do you know whether they're neurodivergent or not? Because 1 in 2 apparently in cyber are, right? So if they are neurodivergent, you're evaluating them on metrics that are not fair because they may have absolutely zero EQ. They may be completely unaware of what's happening around them. And my experience is when you share the impact of what they're doing on other people, they are shocked that they're impacting people like that. So the level of understanding, so the 2 people I was speaking to this morning are absolutely right to feel aggressed and unfair and persecuted. I'm not denying that. But you've got to have empathy to the person who the neurodivergent people you work with, because they're different. That's why they're divergent. They're brilliant. So there's a lot of cultural shift that's going to have to happen. That is not going to be easy.
No,
it's not going to be easy at all. But it's an important move.
Yeah, because a lot of managers hate to make their life harder, right? If I said to someone in a team, I'm going to give you this unusual person, that's going to be a little bit difficult for you to manage, but you'll be fine. They'll be at the dinner table that night with their partner going, "Oh my goodness, what?"
Difficult.
Exactly, right.
But I think to your point on the armed forces, so I think the people to follow right now are CSOC, so the Cyber Special Operations Command, which is the new division launched by the British Ministry of Defence, and is led by General Jim and Deputy Commander General Tom Commager-Sims. And we spent a lot of time with them. We're on their advisory board, and they are being really progressive with talent. So, of course, what the armed forces have always done is, if you get into a fight in Stockport on a Friday night and it looks like you're going to be banged up for a year, you've got the alternative of joining the armed forces, right? They've done that since the origination of military. Caesar did that, so they've got a deep culture of that, of giving people a shot, right? Giving them people discipline and a framework. And so they've had it in their culture. And now what they're doing is they are looking for recruitment age hackers, and they're going to welcome them with pink hair, and they're not going to have to do 1,000 press-ups in puddles, and they're not going to have to get square bashed. They're going to have a different culture, and they've got to absorb that somehow. But the General Tom is really vocal about this, and they're recruiting them through esports. So General Tom is hosting this esports format next year to do exactly that. And just to double up on your point, earlier this year, we went to Cyber Defense Marvel in South Korea. Cyber Defense Marvel is a simulated cyber war hosted in South Korea, conveniently placed. You can imagine who they think the bad guys are. And it involves 26 nations, their armed forces, their intelligence agencies, and the defense contractors. And they participate in a 5-day simulated cyber war. It's unbelievable to watch, by the way. But do you know which team won it? The riflemen. The completely unskilled cyber guys. They won it. And they were so proud and excited. And these are like strapping alpha men and women carrying guns, first in, bosh, bing, bang, explosions. They're not the signals guys, but they were all mega gamers in their free time. And to see them win it, and the pride and also the jealousy from the cyber guys. But it just shows you that the armed forces have opened up their minds. And why have they done that? Because they're at war.
Fascinating. Well, it's been fantastic speaking with you, Fergus, as always. That's about all we have time for, I think. That's 90 minutes runtime. I hope we speak again soon, and I hope all the best with the hacking games. I look forward to getting the HAPTI test across. Nick, you and I are going to have to brush up on a few things before we take these tests.
That's not the point. That is not, don't cheat.
Your data is valuable and it's under attack. Cyber espionage groups, financially motivated threat actors, ransomware attackers, and other criminal enterprises are on the rise. Working in secrecy to dismantle security perimeters, they spread like a virus through the web, stoking geopolitical tensions, holding businesses to ransom, and flooding criminal marketplaces with sensitive information. These groups thrive in secrecy, now more than ever. Knowing who your adversaries are is critical. So join us as we ask who's behind the world's most prolific cybercriminal groups. What are their tactics, their motivations, and their impact? Who are the world's masked actors? Masked Actors is an independent podcast from Group IB, a leading voice in the fight against cybercrime. The threat landscape evolves quickly, but all information was correct at the time of recording and based on Group IB's High-Tech Crime Trends Report 2025. Join in the conversation online using the hashtag #MaskedActors. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for listening. See you next time as we uncover more of the world's top masked actors.